Welcome to Afro Comic Con Virtual 2020. If you're here for the Creating a Superhero Show, a discussion with the creators behind Marvel's Luke Cage, you are in the right place. My name is Karen Mahorn, aka The Blur Girl. I'm a culture journalist and content creator parked at the intersection of geekdom and diversity. Now, I love talking about comic books, for those of you who know me, and superhero shows and everything in between. And I have a background in post-production, so I love talking about how these shows get made. Now, before you meet my amazing guests, I'm going to ask that you please consider donating to the Afro Comic Con Moonshot Junior program that funds young girls of color in a 12-month program where they learn tech skills, innovation, product development, and entrepreneurship. So please click the donation link if you don't see one on your screen. I don't know what screen all of you might be using to watch this, but if you don't see one on the screen, feel free to go to afrocomiccon.org to donate. Now, I am joined today by some of the members of the team that helped make Marvel's Luke Cage basically break Netflix. Now, instead of me reading long bios on everyone, which you probably have already seen, I'd like you each to introduce yourselves and tell us what your title is, what you do, and also how you were involved with the show. Think back a bit.
Okay. Who goes first?
I guess that's you, Cheo.
Yeah, you.
Okay. My name is
you, boss.
I know. I was gonna say, go, boss man.
my name is Cheo Coker. I was the creator and showrunner and executive producer of Marvel's Luke Cage. Before that, I used to write for Southland, Ray Donovan, NCIS LA, and Almost Human, which was that's a whole nother crazy story. And then Walking Dead for like 3 weeks. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here, and thank you so much for bringing us together, because it's not really a job. I mean, everyone here is family, and that was the thing about the show, is that, like, you could always tell, like, what was even on tape, just us getting together was fun, because every time we see each other, we're happy to see each other. And I can definitely say from some of the shows I've been on, that's not always the case. So
let's check in with some of your family members then. Kayla, you're next.
Yes. Hi, Kayla Cooper. I was a writer-producer for Luke Cage. Some of my previous credits include Grimm, Witches of East End, and American Horror Story. I also write features, currently on The Nun 2 for New Line Cinema and Atomic Monster. And as Cheo said, it's like I truly enjoyed my time on Luke Cage. It was a big old family, and it was great getting to write a Black superhero, I will say, saving the day and kicking ass. And so I'll always treasure that experience. So Cheo, thank you for bringing me along on that journey.
thank you. Come on, it wasn't even a question.
Aida?
Hey, Aida Kroll. I was also a writer-producer on Luke Cage. Before that, I worked on a historical drama called Turn, Washington Spies. I worked on a fantasy show out of Canada called Sanctuary that was on Sci-Fi, and a lost season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars that, I'll always have great memories of, but didn't make it to air. And I also just had a terrific time working on Luke Cage, writing a Black superhero, writing kick-ass Black women that also were heroes, and the phenomenal cast that we had and crew that we had. It was, definitely up there in the top of my screenwriting career. And I can't wait to get into the nitty-gritty of how we got it done.
And last but not least, Greg.
Everybody, I'm Greg Anderson. I was the visual effects supervisor for Luke Cage. I was also the effects supervisor for a few other Marvel Netflix shows, for Punisher, as well as the second season of Iron Fist. What can I say? I mean, Luke Cage it holds a very sort of dear place in my heart, because it's by far, the blackest show I've ever worked on. I'm used to being the only Black person on the crew, and we had Black showrunner, Black writers, Black directors, and it was definitely like family. And I was hurt bad when season 3 didn't happen.
Oh.
But
Yeah.
it was really a special experience for me. So thank you, Cheo.
No, well, again, I mean, thank everybody, because I mean, it was so much fun. And, just for a first experience of running a show and to be working with everybody and us all having the same goal and getting, the same destination. And no matter what we faced, doing it together and having fun while doing it. I mean, it was a dream come true. And I really think that when you watch the show, you see that love and attention in every episode, both collectively and individually. I mean, it was just one of those things that I think, it was a highlight. It definitely was for me.
So let's talk about actually what you do a little bit, Cheo, because this comes up a lot when people are discussing shows. This happened with Misha Green very recently, actually. Tell us the difference between a director and a showrunner.
Well, a director basically is responsible for the images that are captured, on camera in term, like literally physically going out and shooting, also making decisions on set in terms of, along with the DP, about how things look, talking and communicating with the actors, also communicating with us as producers. It's always, because of film, it's always been probably the most glamorous job, but with the rise of television, all of a sudden showrunning is also starting to get a certain level, or at least within television, glamour. I mean, the thing about showrunning is that no matter what happens, in the end, the showrunner is going to make the final decision. And so that's why you have to communicate. It's really a job it's about communication. It's about communicating from top to bottom, because, you're going to have these different periods of time when you hone in as a showrunner. You're going to have everything from the scripts, not only your scripts, but all the scripts that we're collectively writing together and separately. Also casting, special effects. There isn't a single decision. I'm just getting all these flashbacks of the process. Like seeing everybody on screen, it's like all of a sudden I feel like we're in blue jeans in a meeting. Talking about like what's going on with this episode, and like have you looked at this? Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? But it's always putting out fires. I mean, like I would say you're part fireman, part head coach. I didn't really understand what Puff Daddy did, until I became a showrunner.
That's okay, Cheo. I still don't.
But that's what it is. It's how it's you basically, it's the flavor. It's the mix. It's the final bits of everything. But really ultimately making sure that you're not getting in the way of everybody working and going in the same direction. But then at the same time, also sometimes saying that nobody agrees with me, but my gut is telling me this is what we need to do, and then go in that direction. But you have to be ready and willing to do that. But also, if you're wrong, admit to it. And that was the thing that was really great about the show, was that we weren't afraid to check each other. Even though sometimes it was like, there were things where we were just like, you know what, let's try this.
Now I'm curious. The show premiered
September 30th of 2016.
2016. So I know we have to think back now.
Yeah.
When did you
to the before times?
I know, right? Yeah, before times we could actually stand in front of each other.
Mm-hmm.
When did each of you remember getting involved? Because it wasn't 2016. It was a little bit before that, right?
I auditioned to get the job in the end of 2014, because it was right after my involvement with Ray Donovan ended, because when Ann Bitterman left that show, I also left, or I was let go. Whoever walked out the door first was what happened. The job, I think around that time or right before was when Marvel announced the fact that they were picking up, they had struck the deal with Netflix to have 13 episodes each of Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and
Jessica Jones.
Jessica Jones at the time, because Punisher wasn't announced till later. And that was the thing, it was one of those open assignments, and I just had a number of meetings until I finally got to the final meeting and then got the gig. Wrote the pilot and second episode, And then Charles Murray came on. And then right after Charles came on, Matt Owens, who's my assistant, wrote the third episode. And then was able to get the show, the show was already greenlit, but able to say, okay, you know, pull together a staff.
Now, I'm curious, Greg, even though you're post-production, were you involved in pre-production?
Yeah, I mean, so I came on, I mean, most of the time visual effects is like the last department to come on to a show. So I came on right before we started production. So,
okay, so that was 2015?
2015, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cheo's 2014, you're 2015. So Kayla and I, you know, were you in between that?
Yeah, I think I was 2015 as
Yeah,
well.
we were both 2015.
Yeah, I remember getting an email from one of the Marvel execs, Kareem Zarek. Shout out to Kareem, who I had known previously. Like, he actually gave me my first job in the industry. He hired me as a research assistant on Jericho in like 2006.
Ooh.
And so like I worked with him from like 2006 to 2007 and then cut to 2015. And he emails me, he's like, hey, I've been following you. And so we have this thing I think might be up your alley. Do you want to meet? And I'm like, of course. And I didn't know it was from Marvel at the time because like Marvel was being like super secretive. And
As
so
always.
like, yeah, it wasn't until like the day of that I found out it's like, hey, it's for this and it's probably for this. And so then I went in and I met with Cheo. And luckily, like I had like hung out with Cheo briefly through another friend who's also a black nerd for the first Avengers movie when that had come out.
Right.
So we kind of had like we had talked at least, but like didn't like know each other. But like you had given me, I think if I can say this, like you give me the Bible, I believe. Like I don't
Right.
think I'd read the first 2 episodes, but I'm like, this is cool. And like I like Luke Cage. So yeah, and like you and I really just talked about nerd shit in our meeting.
Yeah.
And then
Well-
like I left and I think a couple of days later they were like, yep, Cheo wants to hire you. So.
Yeah. Well, because that was the thing was it was at that Avengers screening because our mutual friend was Aaron Thomas, who
Yeah.
now runs the show SWAT on CBS. And you know, partially what it is when you because you cast a writer's room the same way that you cast a show. You know, it's really not just what you read on the page. I mean, because Akela's an incredible writer, but also just
Thank you.
personality. You know, also just, you know, kind of getting a vibe, you know, for somebody. And we just immediately just kind of clicked on story. And also, you know, the fact that she's also in you know, the ultimate geek. Also, you know, that's the things because having the ability to go deep in terms of comic book lore, you know, because sometimes what happens on a show, particularly like this, because at the time there weren't a lot of comic book shows, not everybody coming to the table necessarily like really loves or understands comics. And so that was another advantage. But yeah, no, it was just immediate, you know, everybody that I ended up hiring, you know, there was that click and you just, you know, just immediately think, okay, I can see everybody coming together in a really great way.
I came in 2015 too. Cheo and I have known each other since college. So,
Forever. Yeah.
you know, as soon as it was real, you know, he reached out, he sent me the Bible, the scripts as they came in. And it was just, we weren't sure when it was going to, you know, the room was going to actually be greenlit. And at the time I was in between, I had finished my second season of another show. Legion was coming up. They'd reached out. And I really just had a decision. Am I going to go back to my old show and go over to Luke Cage? Or am I going to go to, you know, and Luke Cage, I wasn't even sure when it was going to start. So it was this really weird, intense moment. And when Cheo was like, you know, it's go time, I just, you know, closed my eyes and was like, what do you want to be saying in the world? And it was Luke Cage. You know, I'd never gotten a chance to do something like this before. And I had to seize it.
How daunting was it taking a character with a known lore and trying to adapt it into live action? And also, I also want to include effects into this because he's got unbreakable skin. So there's certain things that you have to start even choreographing into how, you know, the actor's going to move, which probably also goes into the script. So how did each of you, what was one thing that you felt was challenging about that adaptation process?
I would love to hear Cheo's response to this question, but I'll start. It's as soon as I get into a show, it's about grounding the characters. Like that's the first thing that always pulls me in as a viewer. So I'm always looking to what's the core, what's the essence, what's the heartbeat of a character that, you know, I can work with. And with Luke Cage, I found when I first looked at it, I think the character of Mariah was the most challenging to me.
Mhm.
You know, I think just because on the page it was one thing, and then we cast Alfre, and I was like, obviously it's going to be translated through Alfre's body, and I'm a huge fan of what this woman can bring to the table. So it was just like, what is that going to mean? And I think like it took us a while to really cut to who she was, and I think we had to then go back into scripts and, you know, adapt. I think probably Akela's first season episode is really when we got to the heart of her. So it's when we understood like what her pain was, what she had gone through in childhood. And we had to like make sure like we were really building to that. And it was the first room I'd been when we did that kind of heavy lifting. And we had, even though first seasons are so messy, it's ultimately good that they're messy, because like it's the basis of everything. And we were really toggling back and forth into episodes, trying to get hone the characters once we cast them and once we, you know, started to discover what those actors could do with the role. But I think Mariah's character was so like, once we cast her, it was just like, what are we doing? What's this woman going to be?
Well, that was the thing. It was going, and this kind of interestingly enough goes all the way back to your initial question about the difference between the established, you know, like Marvel Universe depiction of the character versus, you know, how we translated once we had real flesh and blood actors involved. Because, for example, I remember, you know, you first get hired, you sign your life away in terms of privacy with Marvel. Like, you know, if you speak anything, you know, assassins are going to show up.
Yeah, they have snipers.
But I remember the first thing that happened was when I first got the gig, they gave me 2 scripts, because they gave me the scripts for the shows in production, and they gave me the first 2 Jessica Jones scripts, and they gave me the first 2 Daredevil scripts. And I just, man, I read them and I was like, holy shit! I was so, I mean, I know one wasn't supposed to curse, but fuck it. I was so intimidated. I was so just like blown away by the first 2 scripts of each episode. I was like, how do I top that? I was terrifying. And then I said, you know, because here's the thing, Luke Cage is a character, you know, in the comic books at least, he never had a real nemesis the same way that Daredevil has, you know, take your pick, Kingpin, Bullseye, you know, there are a number of arcs that, you know, even Elektra, you know, kind of in a love-hate kind of way. And then also with Jessica Jones, I mean, you know, Kilgrave, Purple Man is really heavy. You know, Luke Cage, every single episode is a different villain, Piranha, you know, different than Piranha Jones, or like take your pick. And so the thing that I realized was, wait a minute, because some of these different villains are going to be so obscure, it's the opportunity to adapt them in ways that might not be as advantageous to having somebody saying, that's not what Daredevil, I mean, that's not what Bullseye is like. That's not what Kingpin is supposed to be like. So, you know, a character like Cottonmouth, you know, there's an arc, but he wasn't necessarily the Cottonmouth that was going to be depicted in the comics. I mean, you know, in terms of the show. And so the great part about having our staff was that we were able to, for the first time, write about Black villains and superheroes that were Black and didn't happen to be Black. So we were able to deal with their Blackness, in addition to also, you know, recreating them in a different way, you know, for this world. And once we cast, everybody, like, you know, everything was different. It was respectful of the comic. You know, the other question, of course, you get is Sweet Christmas and the whole Blaxploitation thing. But my thing about that was that all Blaxploitation is a Black character getting to do what white characters have done throughout the history of the action movies, which is be cool, wear cool clothes, have a theme song, kick ass, and in the end, get the love interest. And that's pretty much what it is. And so taking that attitude and then putting it into this world, and then once we were able to get with the characters, I mean, in the writer's room, it was a blast, just kind of going through things. And then once it was cast, that was something else. And then once we actually got to set, then things, took a whole nother level, which is why the process, it never stays still. And that's really the most fun part about making a television show.
Now, I have to ask, because all of you have so much experience working on different shows, whether or not it's, writing or effects or what, but this is a little different in that Netflix, you're not looking at week after week after week, you're writing for a whole season because they're dropping an entire season at once. Is there a different way that you write when you know someone's going to binge watch? What's the difference for each of you when you're working on streaming shows?
Michaela?
I was going to say, this just goes to because this was my first Netflix show. And so I'd say it's like, at the time, I guess Ted Sarandos had said the only competition that Netflix had was sleep. And so
they're not wrong.
It was basically for me, like having come off of like Grimm and Witches of East End and The 100 on the CW, like shows that were week to week. We had time to breathe. And for this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aida and Cheo, it felt like it's like you had to have that cliffhanger at the end that would keep the viewer watching. Like if it came out at midnight, like, Ted Sarandos and Netflix wants you up until 8 a.m.
Right.
And so that to me, it's like, okay, at that point, it does kind of feel like one, I hate to say this, 13-hour movie. And so that was the thing, was like always having that to make sure you had a hook at the end of the episode that was going to keep the viewer watching. That was a new thing to me. Whereas it's like sometimes on like network shows, you could end on a character moment and, trust that the audience was going to come back the next week, even just off of that, because they also like on network, you have the benefit of it's like next week on, and then you're seeing the next week. You don't have that with streaming. So it is like, like that end of the episode hook, you gotta get it.
But it's like a comic book. It's like you got to have that last page where it's like the cliffhanger so that everybody comes back. Okay, Cheo, is this show and tell? What's happening?
Well, yeah, because I'm about to break my our Marvel agreement. So hopefully
those ninjas are going to get you.
That's what I'm saying. Listen, man, it's 2020. Don't do this.
Are you going to risk it?
Hopefully I don't get sued, but then again, the people that would have sued me already got fired by Marvel, so it's fine.
At this point, that mouse is coming to get you.
So, for example, this was...
Oh my God, you still have that.
Wow.
So everything was an arc. The thing I always thought about was each episode is an act. So episode 1, act 1, episode 2, act 2, episode 3, act 3. Fourth episode is always a twist. So it's always upwards twisting action. So episodes 1 through 4 were hidden agenda. Episodes 5 through 9 were revenge. And episodes 110 through 113 were redemption. And then the other themes that were for each arc was exposure, vulnerability, possibility. And so one of the first things we did as a room was together, we were working to articulate these themes. Because the thing that we do as a room is, the reason I always likened show running to being a head coach is I had a philosophy that, basically, if I don't know if you're as obsessed with like Inside the NFL or Hard Knocks or shows like that.
Yeah, I don't know sports ball. I'm sorry.
So what happens is that you basically have a room that looks like a writer's room, and you have all these different coaches. The game plan they work on every week is called the script. You have offensive coaches, you have defensive coaches, and the coordinators run each side. So I always considered offense to be dialogue. I've always considered defense to be structure. And for me, the way that I always worked with Akela and Aida was I always called Akela my defensive coordinator, because structurally she was always, there was always a point in the show where everything would fall apart, and then she would say, what if you move this here, and like, oh shit, she just saved the season. And then Aida, and from an offensive standpoint, was not just dialogue, but like she was talking about, character. Although everybody in the room was strong in both, so we all contributed to each character and the structure of everything, because the conversations are what keeps it going. And so in that, if you kind of extend that analogy, then, Luke Cage or Mike Coulter is, the quarterback. And so you basically are talking to the players with the script, and then you just are trying to always together work on every single individual episode. But then each writer, when they write the episode, that's when they put their own flavor on it. That's when they bring different things to it. And then what happens is that once they go off to produce their episodes, they're also on set, because they're running the set, are able to also make sure that the intentions of the writer's room are followed, but then also have individual moments. And so we all of us have shared memories of the room, but then there's individual memories of Akela and Aida running their sets. And then as showrunner, like sometimes being in LA or Seattle, either being able to be on set or not be able to be on set, you have to have complete trust in what's happening. And the thing was that I could always trust them, like I trusted everybody on that produced their episodes, to be in communication. And the thing with Greg is that all of us with these constant meetings and talking about the intentions of every single episode, talking about in production meetings, like, if we have a stunt that's going to take place, or if we have to do certain things, that's how it all works. Is we're constantly talking to each other and communicating, so that by the time a director actually has it up on its feet and the actors are acting, you're ready for anything that happens, because things always go left. Like I remember, episode 8 was one of those, season 1 was one of those episodes that kind of got a little crazy. And, and I remember Aida was out there for that one. That was her episode. The episode before it was Manifest, which wasn't as crazy, but a lot of emotional acting. And that was Akela's episode. So it's
Mm-hmm.
there's always something happening. And, like people always ask, like, what's the job? I mean, the job really is, it's like we're a part of everything, it's a really, this isn't even being humble. It really is a shared effort.
Now, I got to ask, there's quite a lot of work that is obviously happening behind the scenes with all the scripts and all of the balls you got to keep in the air. But at the end of the day, it's a superhero show, and people are showing up to see some superheroics. So when we're talking about things like people punching, Luke Cage in the face and their hand breaking, and you're seeing all the bones, or him getting shot at and bullets aren't going anywhere, or talk to us a little bit, Greg, about how were you getting scripts, or were you getting scenes, or were you getting both?
Well, I was definitely getting scripts, and going back to your streaming question earlier, one thing that's actually was a positive about sort of doing effects for a streaming show versus network is that the schedule was more feature-like. So at the beginning, I would get scripts that, people were always telling me like, oh, in, episode 3, we're going to blow up a building. So you better start thinking about how to do that, because we always, in effects, we always need, a good amount of lead time to design sort of big environmental effects. I think one of the challenges with Luke Cage from an effects standpoint and a heroic standpoint is, in the comic books, he's portrayed very, very strong, very powerfully. And, from the beginning, there was this sort of push to kind of ground him a bit more in the live action show. So he didn't appear as strong as he did in the comics, but we still had to sort of have these conversations about like, okay, well, how strong is he? And what can he do? What happens if someone's so strong and they never look like they're exerting effort? So there's no drama in that. Like, okay, he's having these fights with these people, and, he had this slap food, where essentially, you know, it's like if he punched someone, he would kill them. But we were talking about this stuff before, you know, we got on set, because it's like, okay, they're shooting bullets at him. It's like, oh, what do the bullets do? Do they hit him and just drop, or do they bounce around into the world? What is it? And so there was so many talks, both in prep and then after, when we were in post. You know, there were lots of decisions that were getting made that, you know, I didn't always anticipate when we were shooting. But then once we got into post, like the whole notion of the breaking of the arm, that was really like how that ended up looking the way it did was really more in post, because initially it wasn't going to be this sort of bloody, gory thing, you know? And so once we got into it, on the post side, it was like, no, let's do it. Let's break the arm. Let's do a compound fracture. Let's do it. And then I showed some tests, and it was like, yeah, this is gonna work.
That's what I'm saying. You see his face? Because he's like, no, man, let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
compound fractures. Let's get blood. Let's get skin. Let's go for it. And actually, that brings me to my next question. Did Marvel put parameters on you all? It sounds like Netflix was like, just as long as they stay awake and watch all 8, we don't care. But in terms of Marvel, did Marvel ever go, oh, okay?
Well, Marvel is Swahili for parameters.
I was gonna say, did they?
I mean, it's when you talk about permissions and the way things work, I mean, it's like, there isn't a single detail, and I'm talking about minuscule details that would just mind numb you if we really got into it, that did not escape Marvel. So it was always fun subverting things here and there, but for the most part, everything was just always controlled. The one thing that I lament, even though I certainly can't talk about our budget, one of the beautiful things now is seeing a show like Lovecraft Country, where, I mean, you can just look at, I mean, they must have had 3 times our budget.
I was going to say, Greg, you must see those Shoggoth monsters like, really?
You know what I'm saying? It was like, there were, that was the one difference in terms of our eras, is that, you know, yes, Netflix spent a lot of money on Luke Cage, and I'm appreciative of the 2 seasons of what we did. But at the same time, Black culture was the special effect of Luke Cage, because we were never going to be able to put up the kinds of, you know, things that you were used to seeing, you know, in a Marvel Studios, you know, feature film type thing. Well,
you also, Cheo, not to cut you off, but think about it this way. Also, you dropped, first of all, you broke Netflix, and then after that, remember, 2 years later, you have Black Panther and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which were the same year. I have to keep reminding people they were in the same year in 2018.
Yeah, February and December.
Right. So when you think about it, it really was Luke Cage. Like, Luke Cage had to walk before the rest of these shows and movies could run. So y'all really did, you know, usher in what we already knew, and that is Black folks are geeks. We love watching, you know, superhero stuff. Like, so I think it's sort of like the rest of the world caught up to us. Mm-hmm. And I got to ask, because we've talked so much about how amazing this experience was, as well as the writer's room. So I got to hear, what are regular or other writer's rooms like? I mean, you don't have to name any shows, but you can. You don't have to name any shows. Don't name any names. I want everybody to, you know, not get in trouble. But tell me a little bit about, like, what it's like not being on a Luke Cage writer's room.
I definitely can speak to that. I mean, look, it's, on one hand, I'm pretty fortunate in my career that I've been in multiple rooms where I'm not the only Black person or not the only Black woman. Like, even before Luke Cage, the show I worked on before that, Turn Washington Spies, it was me and this wonderful writer, LaToya Morgan.
Yeah.
Both of us were on that show. I couldn't believe it. And that was, you know, from the first season. After Cage, I was also writing for Jessica Jones. There were 3 of us Black people in that room in season 2. So I've had, and of course on Luke Cage, there was Kayla and I, Black women, and the whole room was blickety black. So, you know, I've been I've been so, even on my last season of Star Wars Clone Wars, Charles Murray was in the room with me. So I've been super fortunate. But on Luke Cage was the only place where not only I didn't have to fight to define, to speak about Black culture, Black
Yeah.
experience. I didn't have to fight through the lack of the ignorance, the straight ignorance that a lot of white people have. I didn't have to fight that. And there was not only like there's all of us, we had so many different experiences. We come from so many different backgrounds. So it was this great tapestry of Black authentic experiences in the room, you know, talking about what this could be. So it was amazing. Like outside of that, you can be the only person, you can be one of two, but it's still, what I've found in other rooms is like, there's just, white people do not understand Black people. Like it's just that.
That's actually the memoir for 2020. That's actually the name of the book coming out for 2020.
Yeah.
You know, and so one anecdote. I was in a writer's room where, I don't want to say the show, but we had a scene where a white woman committed an act of significant violence and then needed a jet because she had something else to do. And there was a Black male character that was supposed to stick around and talk to the cops and explain what happened. And I was just like,
that would never happen.
He was supposed to just explain she didn't really mean it and then bounce. And I was like, that will never happen. His life is in danger. We got to talk about, would he make that choice?
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're saying he makes that choice, what happens to him when he's a Black man standing over somebody who's been beaten up and cops happen upon him? We have to talk about that. I was told, like, it's my agenda, you know, this not really about that. Can we move it along? It got to be, you know, I had to raise it several times because it came up in the breaking of it. Then it happened in the outlining. Then it happened in the script. And I saw it in the script and I was like, I have to say something again. And finally, I had to just say, I had to list, I've been through this with cops. My partner's been through this with cops. My brother's been through it. And I had to like detail, this is what happened, us being around them. Physics is different for Black people around cops than white people around cops. That's what you need. And it was at that moment when it was like, I'm a Black woman in the room that the showrunner respected, and they had to look at, you know, the vulnerability of saying, you know, my safety was violated. This has happened to me, before they could actually be like, this minor plot point, let's talk about it further. Let's see what we can do. Like, that's being in a white writer's room to me. You're going to have those experiences, and partly that's part of why you're there, but it's also exhausting.
Yeah,
absolutely. Greg, is it still Highlander syndrome for you in post?
I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think, you know, it doesn't help that, you know, of all the departments, you know, visual effects is still the least diverse. So most of the time, you know, there's maybe 5 Black visual effects supervisors working in TV right now, maybe.
And I believe, you're being modest, but I believe you're the highest ranking one.
Well, I've been doing it for a long time, you know, and I think, so oftentimes, like, what was refreshing about Luke Cage is that, you know, there was a lot more room for collaboration, because I'm a big old nerd and comic book head. I was a huge Marvel fan since I was like 7. So, like, you know, being able to bring ideas to the table and not feel like it's going to be discounted because, you know, what do I know? I'm just the Black guy in the room. Because most of the shows that I've done, you know, as the visual effects supervisor, you know, I'm the only Black department head. You know, it's like all the Black people were PAs, you know, and so I kind of got into this, pattern of having to prove myself. And once I started to like feel that, then I would just kind of be an asshole and I would just wear my MIT sweatshirt, to the first meeting, because invariably someone goes, "Oh, you went to MIT?" I'm like, "Yes, twice." So what can I tell you about visual effects? Because it's kind of an asshole thing, but it was like, you get tired of getting talked over about what you specialize in. And is it racial? I know better. Yes, it absolutely is. And so, that's what was so like great about working on this show. And subsequently, I've had a chance to work with Ava DuVernay on two projects. And it's the same kind of like familial vibe and trust that I can bring ideas to the table, because with visual effects, it's still very much a black box. Like people, if you don't do visual effects for a living, it is like magic, right? And I'm aware of that. And so my job is to translate, that magic to writers and directors and say, okay, what do you want to do? Because there's a million ways we can accomplish this. Let's talk it through and figure it out. And I want to get your vision on the screen. Like, I don't, it's not about my vision. It's about creating your vision. And these are the tools by which we do that. And that kind of back and forth that starts in prep and goes all the way until delivery. So being able to be in that sort of creative safe space is really kind of critical and great.
Now, in the time we have left, we can't take questions because they're not here. It's not live. But I do want to, for people who are interested in doing what all of you do.
Don't.
If
Run. Why, you fools?
But there's now, I mean, like I said, there's before Black Panther and there's after. Now there's all of these, since there have been Watchmen, and there's been, Lovecraft Country and all these other amazing shows, and there's more coming. So there's a lot of people that are excited about doing what all of you do. What would be a piece of advice besides run that you would give other people who want to do what each of you do, briefly?
I think read everything you can get your hands on. What happens, and this is actually a trick that got confirmed to me by Charles Murray. We both do the Kaiser Sose thing, which is like the second we go into a room, we look at the bookshelves that the executive has. And then, in most cases, because I'm always have an insatiable curiosity about things, I can just immediately just start thinking, like, much like Verbal Kit, I just start pulling stuff and just start thinking about ideas and start talking about just everything in addition to what the room I've been brought into. And so as a result, what happens is that they're just as jazzed about my enthusiasm for story, for life, for having different experiences, for different cultures, for everything, as they are in terms of anything that I've written. And so I think the advice that I would say is read as much as you can, and then just be curious and just never lose that curiosity. And also just, it's not how you get your foot in the door, it's staying in the room that's really important. And so sometimes people will say, well, I'm not going to do an entry-level job because but that's the thing. It's like, if you know what you're going to do, you can flip that into something else. So all the time, sometimes with PAs and interns are like, I don't want to get coffee. I don't want to do this. I want to do that. But it's like, you have access to the set. Frank Darabont, before he directed Shawshank Redemption, he was dressed in sets. And so you got to see what the director did. You got to see the actors interact. Ava DuVernay, when she was a publicist, got to spend hours and hours and hours watching Michael Mann make Collateral and some of the other movies that were made, so that when she directed her movies, she was able to use a lot of that stuff. So it does not matter. If you want to be in film, if you want to be in television, just get the gig and then stick around, because opportunity will present itself as long as you show up early and leave late.
No, absolutely. Every job I've ever gotten in production, post, and everything has been because people forgot I was in the room and didn't realize I knew all the things I knew because I'd been in the room all the time. So, Akela, what would some advice you give?
Um, give yourself permission to fail and be okay with failing, because you're gonna fuck up. Whoop, there it is. You're gonna fuck up and you're gonna fail a lot. You're gonna get rejected. I've been fired. Like, at some point you're gonna get fired in this job. Don't
Me
take it
too.
personally. Like, it's like, yeah, you have to. It's I think it was Cheo's gonna hate me for this. It's like Muhammad Ali. It's like, it's not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get back up again. Like, this business is not easy, and it's especially not easy for people of color, and it's especially not easy for women, compounded with that being women of color.
Amen.
So, like, learn to grow a tough skin, and learn to get back up again.
Thank you. Aida, what advice do you have?
I all that sounds amazing. I would say, if you think you're going to love this, like, I would say at the core, Cheo, Akela, and I are writers, and then we stack on top of that producing, directing, but at the core, we're writers. And that's, you literally just need a pad of paper and a pen or a pencil, and you can do it. You don't need any other, and your imagination. You don't need any other thing. So if this is something that you want to do, you absolutely have to stay doing it. You have to be writing constantly. And like Akela said, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to succeed. Keep going. And you'll get there, because it is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You do not need to be discovered overnight. What you have to do is, keep your mind strong, your body strong, and stay at it, and you'll get it done.
Yeah, I mean, people, to add to what Aida is saying, people sometimes ask me, like, what do you need to be a successful writer? It's sometimes the question you get at a bookstore or after a panel. And I say, look, you need a $50 folding table from Staples. You need a lamp. If you have a computer, great. If you want to write by hand, write by hand. But then when you get your chair, make sure it's about $350, $400. And they're like, why? Why do you want to have such an expensive chair? I said, because you're gonna have to sit in that thing for 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours. And you're gonna do it mornings, you're gonna do it nights, you're gonna do it weekends, you're gonna do it all the time. And so you have to be comfortable, because otherwise, if you're not in a comfortable chair, you're not gonna want to sit down. And if you don't sit down, you're not gonna write. And that's the thing, is that you constantly, your work area is your dojo. That's what it is. It's basically a space where you're able to kind of be your most creative. I mean, for me, I was pulling my camera. My desk is a whiteboard desk, and so I found one on Amazon that was actually supposed to be for like kindergartners. Like a table they can draw on, but the legs come up, so it's actually like an adult sized table. But like, you have to create something where you can always, if you have an idea, jot something down, or just whatever works for you. You have to be able to foster that in your one little place, even if it's a little table, folding table in the corner. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it has to be something that makes you want to sit down and create, because once you do that, everything else will happen. You just got to keep pushing at it.
Now, Greg, I gotta ask, do you have an expensive chair?
Yeah.
Because I know in post-production.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's essential, because we're chained to our desks 12 hours a day. I mean, I think, for me, and what I would suggest is just becoming a student of film. Visual effects is about really creating believable imagery, sometimes from nothing. So a good visual effects artist and supervisor understands camera, understands light, understands production design, understands directing. So, I ask a ton of questions, and I'm constantly studying all of those crafts, because those things, the better I understand those, the better images I can create, and the better I can communicate with those other creatives to kind of create their vision.
That's amazing. And I really, really want to thank all of you, Greg, Cheo, Aida, Akela. Thank you so much for like taking the time. I'm surprised. I feel like you guys probably have all seen each other, but judging for the conversations you were having
But
before
we haven't. I mean,
this is a catch up. So I'm so happy that we were able to do this.
Well, because the craziest part about this, I mean, the good news is that it's a renaissance where our services are really being appreciated. So we're all busy, and we're probably because now without filming, everyone's stockpiling. So we're all busier than we've ever been. But as a result, it's like, you know, other than following each other's Twitter feeds, we just haven't had the opportunity to really catch up in a while. So like, I just wrote in the group chat how happy I am just to see everybody. I'm just like, you know, being up here in Seattle, like it isn't like I'm in LA or running into anybody. So I've been socially distanced since 2016.
We can't run into anybody in LA anyways.
I was supposed to leave the house. You're not supposed to be running into anybody anyway.
But just literally just seeing everybody is just, not only is it just, so thank you so much for just in the midst of all this craziness pulling us together, because not only is it fun just to talk about this stuff, it's just really good seeing everybody, because it's like it really brings me back to like the show, you know, and we used to do this all the time. So it's just, thank you.
Yes, this was fun.
Thank you everyone who has watched and hung out with us. Thank you so much for joining us as we took a look behind the scenes in one of the most popular shows in the past 20 years. Yes, I said it, on TV. I'm going to leave you with a few things to think about. 1, get a whiteboard table. 2, get a very expensive chair. 3, please consider donating to the Afro Comic Con Moonshot Junior program that funds, like I said, this is STEM for girls. This is something that we need. So we're really, really excited about being able to teach all these girls some tech skills. And again, entrepreneurship. Please, please donate and enjoy the rest of the con, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.